Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll wait a minute here. It takes time for the system to let everybody pop on. So we'll take just a second here and let everyone get on, and I'll get this PowerPoint ready to go. All right. Okay, welcome everyone. So nice to see you here. Some of you I know, some of you I don't, but I am thrilled. I am thrilled you are here. I am so excited to teach this class. This is going to be so much fun. This is very much an epiphany, kind of totally shift your thinking kind of class, because we're going to show you how to understand homeopathics, how to look at them, how to use them, the rules of how they work, which is stuff that's very much either not understood at all or misunderstood. And you're going to come out tonight knowing how all of that works. So I'm excited to have you here. Welcome. Okay, I want to start by introducing myself a little bit, because some of you know me well and some of you probably don't know me at all. So hello, I am Angie Christensen, and I want to tell you a little bit about my history and how I ended up at this point, so you understand the perspective I'm coming from and why I teach what I teach. So for me, my whole journey into the world of healing, of course, came by being extremely sick, which is what happens with many, many people. By the time I was 20, I had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I was on 3 prescriptions every day for that. I had IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. I had cystitis in my bladder. I had allergies, anxiety, depression. But the one that really pushed me over the edge was I had really, really atypically aggressive endometriosis, and it literally was eating through all the organs in my abdomen. And so I had 6 surgeries in 5 years, and it was by surgery number 6 that I said, that is it. I could see where this was headed. By that 6th surgery, they'd had to take out a whole chunk of my colon, which fortunately I was blessed, because you can live without a chunk of your colon, but it is not a pleasant experience and not something I ever want to do again. And that was enough. That was enough for me to see that though I had done everything that Western medicine had to offer, I was only getting sicker. I was not getting better, and that I had a moment where I very much realized my life was on the line. And so even though I knew nothing about holistic medicine at all, I had been raised and grown up in a completely Western medicine household. I knew nothing. I jumped headfirst because I was willing to do anything. And as I jumped into that world of holistic medicine, my life completely changed. The first place I went, of course, was nutrition, because everybody agrees that's the most important thing that we can do for our health. And that one change alone was enough to get me off all 3 of my prescriptions, not be dealing with fibromyalgia on a daily basis anymore. And it also stopped all the surgeries. I've now been 18 years surgery free. So that a nutrition alone was a huge game changer for me. And that's why the first thing I started teaching and was nutrition. And that's why my company is called Simply Divine Eating, as I help other people to heal through nutrition. But as my life went on, we adopted 3 special needs kids. And I had additional things. Life hits you, right? And 5 years ago I ended up with a colon tumor. And that pushed me even farther into the world of holistic health, because nutrition was a big part of my healing and helping my kids, but it wasn't enough by itself. I needed other tools in my toolbox. And so these other experiences have helped me collect this huge, what I call healing toolbox of different holistic resources that don't just Band-Aid symptoms, that really help us to heal. I was able to get rid of that colon tumor with no surgery, no chemo, no anything, and it is gone. And that kind of healing of the human body really is possible if we give it the help it needs. But when we're sick, it's proof that the body is struggling, right? Whether it's just a cold or whether it's a chronic illness, it's proof that the body's kind of been pushed to a point that it can't turn it around by itself, or it would have. And so all of these amazing holistic tools are here to help us give our bodies the support just to lift it enough that then it can do the healing that it really does know deep down how to do. And so now my business has expanded to Simply Divine Healing, where I teach that complete toolbox for people to heal. And there's no one thing that works for everything. That's why we have a toolbox. But I have to tell you that homeopathy is, without a doubt, one of the most powerful, most helpful, and without question, the fastest resource for holistic healing. And I want to show you why that is such a big deal in my house. That I have 3 kids, very high need kids. They're not just high need kids emotionally, they're also high need kids medically. And though I have done a lot of stuff, I've gotten certified in neurofeedback, I've been trained in energy medicine, I've gotten training in herbs, I've done all sorts of things. But all of those things take quite a bit of time. And even though I could help my kids, what I found was I did not have enough time through those tools to meet every need my children had. I needed something faster. And that is the need that homeopathy has filled for our family. So I want to show you. Come here, Jeremiah. Okay. So I want you guys to meet this little girl because this is the birth of homeopathy in our family. This is Dorinia. Say hi.
Hi.
Hi. She is 7 years old and we just brought her home from Thailand in February. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she is our 3rd adoption and our youngest child. Now, she's going to be here with me because she cannot yet be apart from me, so she'll be here listening as we talk tonight. But when we were getting ready to go pick her up, I knew I needed a new tool. Our 2nd son was adopted when he was 2 from India. And when you do an international adoption, you have to do all of this training and all of this reading so that you understand what you're getting yourself into, right? Because it's a big thing, and these kids are going through a lot as you go through this. And so we had done all of that, but despite everything we've learned, I was still sideswiped a little. I was still overwhelmed with the magnitude of the trauma that we needed to deal with when we brought my 2nd son home. So my son Josh, he was 2. He has cerebral palsy on one side of his body from a stroke at birth. And so we brought him home at 2, but he was not walking, not talking, not doing any of those normal 2-year-old things when we brought him home. But the biggest challenge when we brought him home was his trauma. And you guys have probably heard of the fight, flight, or freeze reflex, right? So when we go through trauma, our body is going to do one of those things. It's either going to fight back to try to survive, it's going to run away, or it's going to freeze. And Josh was a freeze kid. And when we got Josh and brought him home, he spent at least 50% of the day frozen. And when I say frozen, I mean like glazed over. You could talk to him, he would not respond. You could touch him, he would not respond. And that was his body's reaction to the trauma. And so this was a huge thing that we did not have the tools to deal with. And we have tried a lot of things over the years. Josh is now 11. And yet that freeze reaction of his neurological system has continued to be one of our biggest challenges, because anytime he gets scared, stressed, anything, he just freezes. And I will tell you, the only thing that has fixed it has been homeopathy. We have been treating that freeze reflex in Josh now for about for a couple of months, and he now freezes very rarely. And when he does, he can come out of it within 5 minutes, which before it used to be a 10 to 30 minute thing every time he would freeze. And so we knew as we were going into another adoption, I knew I needed to get deeper into homeopathy. And so that's when I got some training and I started just digging into this. And I started creating myself all of these charts of homeopathy for trauma, for anxiety, for depression, for grief, all of these things that I knew our daughter was going to be dealing with. And it helped so much in the adoption. But the surprise was how much it helped me in the adoption. International adoption is extremely, extremely stressful, especially as you get down to the last couple months before you're going. And we had some things go wrong there at the end, and it was extremely stressful. And I started having full-blown panic attacks. The only time in my life I've had the full, I can't breathe, I'm going to die kind of panic attacks has been during our international adoptions, both of them. And this time I had homeopathics, and we could shut down a panic attack in less than a minute. It was amazing for me. And when I would be up at night, I have a tendency to not be able to sleep, and just the racing thoughts and things that go through your head that you cannot stop. I don't know if you guys have experienced those, some of you who deal with anxiety where the thoughts just spin and spin and you can't stop it. The homeopathics would stop that and I could go back to sleep. And so despite the fact that I learned this for my daughter, it has helped all of our family so much that if I could go back decades and pick just one thing that I so wish I had known a long time ago, it is homeopathy. It would have changed our entire family's experience over the last couple decades if I had had that tool. And that is why I feel so strongly now about teaching this and getting this out to people, because it really is just a complete game changer. But it works almost opposite of everything that we're used to using, even in holistic tools. We have to flip everything we're used to thinking completely on its head, which is what I'm going to teach you how to do tonight. And so it requires a little bit of education. Some of you may be somewhat versed in homeopathy. Some of you may have played with it just a little bit. Before I got trained, I had kind of played with it a little bit. I'd had some doctors who had used it a little bit. But what I found out when I got trained was that I had been doing it wrong, and most of the doctors that had been doing it for me had been doing it wrong. There are some really specific rules about homeopathy that you have to understand to do it correctly. And we're going to teach you all of those tonight so that you can do this well. So here is what my goal for tonight is, okay? I'm trying to take something that is incredibly complex and very theoretical. If you study homeopathy much, it can get into some really deep theoretical discussions and analyses, and it's easy to get lost in that. So what I'm going to try to do tonight is take this complex theoretical topic and make it concrete, practical, and understandable. We're going to literally just line this all up for you so that it is really easy for you to understand the science, the rules, and the basics of exactly how this works. We aren't going to get lost in any of the theory. We're going to boil this down really to its heart of how you can use it in everyday life so that you know how this works, okay? We're going to teach you the principles and the rules that govern choosing and using homeopathy, and how to start finding and even purchasing the remedies that you need, okay? So that's the goal for tonight. I have a PowerPoint here that I'm going to pull up so that you can see, for those of you who are more visual learners, so that you can see what we're talking about. It'll also make it easier if you're trying to take notes. And then we'll go through this point by point. I want you guys to feel free to ask questions. If you want to ask questions, you can ask them in the chat box. You can type them into the chat box if you want. And I'll stop and answer questions as we go. We'll also have a Q&A part at the end for you to answer any questions that haven't gotten answered through the process of the class. You've all been automatically muted as you've joined the class, just to keep things quiet and so that you can do whatever you need to do and not worry about it. But you can unmute yourself anytime you need to. So there's a little button on your picture where you can click and unmute yourself. So if you need to ask a question, feel free to hit that button to unmute and go ahead and ask a question. So I'm going to stop right now before we start up the PowerPoint. Does anyone have any specific questions or needs that they want me to address as we go through here? Anything you want to open up here at the beginning before we dive in?
I'd like to just make sure we can, if you can emphasize panic attacks.
Okay.
Something to do with that. I've got a son that's dealing with it, like currently.
Okay. All right. So we'll talk a little bit about how that works. Pandas, brain inflammation. Yes, I have a son with pandas. Are there times that homeopathy does not work, and why? Okay, that's a good question. Gladys, if I don't remember to address that as we go through, feel free to bring that up again at the end, okay? And we'll talk about that a little bit. For those of you who are wanting to look at very specific issues, you're going to see as we go through the class by how homeopathy works, why the answer to that may be different than what you think right now at the beginning of the class. But hopefully that will all become clear so that then I can help you to find the things that you need, okay? So if any of those don't get answered as we go, feel free to come around at the end and remind me. Menopause, absolutely. There's that's probably the easiest question asked so far. Yes, that one's very straightforward. Yes, you can use homeopathy for that. Okay, potty training. Okay. All right. See, it is amazing the stuff we're dealing with, isn't it? And it's amazing how homeopathy can fix things you would think are unfixable. And it works a little different than you think. So let's go through a little bit of the hows and the whys and the what this is, and then we can come back around and talk about specific questions you've got. Okay, so now I have to see if I can make my PowerPoint work for you, because it's going to be a waste if I can't, isn't it? It's not. Okay, so if I pull that up on my screen. Let me try this again. Sorry, I usually just talk. I don't usually do PowerPoints, so be a little patient with me. Okay, can you guys see the PowerPoint? Karen, I can see you. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see it? We good? Okay. All right, and you can still see me if you need to. Not that looking at me is any kind of requirement for this class. All right. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and start into this. Let's go. Is it going? All right. Okay. All right. Now you guys probably can't see all the pictures. Do you guys, Karen, can you see yourself on the screen, I assume? I'm going to unmute you. Do you see that? It's not working. Okay, go ahead.
I can see you at the bottom of my screen, and then I can see the actual slide.
Okay, because I see you and you're blocking the picture, but that's not happening for you then. You're okay?
No.
You can move.
Yes.
You can move the picture out of the way.
Yeah.
Just if you have two screens. I have two screens. So if you only have one screen, you can move it up in the corner.
Okay. All right.
My at the bottom.
Okay. So can everyone see everything they need to see on this slide? We good?
I can.
Okay. All right. Let's get into it then. Okay. What is a homeopathic in the first place? Okay. Most simply put, a homeopathic is a very precise super dilution. Now, when we say super dilution, I mean like it's been diluted hundreds or thousands of times from the original substance. So really, in the end, all that's left is like the imprint of the original substance. So if you guys look at this picture, this shows you kind of some of the rules of making a homeopathic dilution. Okay, so they take a tincture of the original substance, they put 1 drop of the original substance into 99 drops of alcohol or water. Okay, so it's been diluted 1 to 99. That's considered a 1-time dilution. To have a 2 times dilution, they now take just 1 drop of the 1 to 99 and put that in 99 drops of alcohol water. And you do that again and again and again. So you can see that very, very soon in this process, the actual, like if you looked on a microscope, you are not going to find the original substance. Okay, it has been diluted far, far, far too far to look under a microscope and actually see the original substance that you started with. But what is amazing is that this super dilution process takes something and turns it into something completely different. Very often the exact opposite of what it started at. So homeopathic can be made from a plant, it can be made from an animal, it can be made from a mineral, it can be made from a toxin, it can be made from a poison. It can be made from anything. And by the time you go through this very precise dilution process to create a homeopathic, what most homeopathics end up doing is curing whatever the original substance would have created. Okay, so if you have something that is a poison, it becomes an antidote. If you start with a plant that creates a symptom, the homeopathic ends up eliminating that symptom. It takes things and it turns it completely on its head. Now, here's why I love this. I love this, I love this, I love this. Because if any of you have taken any of my other classes, you know that I teach people how to use the earth as a textbook. Because the way the earth is created, it's not just created to give us everything we need to heal, but it's also created in a way to teach us how to use everything that's on the earth. And that's a fabulous thing to learn how to do. But if you come to believe that, which in all my study and all my experience, I have come to believe to my very core, and that is that on this earth is the solution to every problem that we ever run into. The healing power for every illness, everything that we experience on this earth is here. The trick is finding it and learning how to use it. And that includes poisons, it includes toxins, and homeopathy is what makes that possible. All of a sudden, it takes things that are poisons and toxins and turns them into treatments. And that just makes my little earth-loving heart sing, because that's just such a cool concept that takes the power of the earth to a whole new level. Now, if that seems weird, it actually isn't. If you know anything about how most prescriptions are created, most prescriptions actually start with plants and toxins and things like that as well. It's not at all an unusual concept, even in modern pharmaceuticals, to make a cure out of a poison. They just do it in a completely different way. But this is a beautiful way that does it without creating all the side effects and other things that we struggle with in a lot of the pharmaceutical preparations. Okay, so here's a little bit, very condensed, on the history of homeopathy. This concept was used as early as with Hippocrates in 400, this is old stuff. But the person who is considered the father of modern homeopathy is Samuel Hahnemann. And he is the one who turned this into a science. It was in the 1700s that he discovered this principle that if you take a substance and give it to a healthy person, whatever symptom it creates in a healthy person, it will also cure that same symptom in a sick person. Okay, I know that sounds weird, but this is what he discovered. So here's a really extreme example. Let's look at snake venom. Okay, so if you have someone who's bit by a snake, one of the things that's going to do is it's going to stop their heart. Now, what that means is if you create a homeopathic of snake venom, it's going to treat heart disease. Isn't that cool? So the challenge that he had as he discovered this principle is, okay, so how do you administer this stuff without hurting people, right? Because what he found is if he diluted these things enough that it didn't hurt someone, it also didn't help anymore either. So he was kind of in this, you know, no-win situation. He realized that something that could cause a disease could also cure a disease, but if he diluted it enough to not hurt someone, he also took away its power to heal. And that was his challenge. And what he discovered was this specific preparation of dilution where what happens in between each dilution is called succussion. Okay, so when you looked at that graphic that shows the dilution process as it goes down, and you take 1 drop of this one and add it to 99, then 1 drop of that and you add it to 99. What he found was that the essential process in between each one is what is called succussion. And so that is each time they dilute it, they take the substance and they shake it or they hit it against something. And as simple as that sounds, that principle of succussion created a process at which increased dilution created increased healing power instead of decreased healing power with dilution. And so now the way homeopathics work, and we'll talk more about this in a little bit, but you need to understand this, is the more diluted they get, the more intense of a treatment they are. So the more diluted a homeopathic is, the more potent it is. So you do need to understand potencies, and we're going to talk about that a little more as we go. But when he added succussion to the process, what he found is increased dilution creates increased potency, not decreased potency. And that is the method by which every homeopathic is created today. They have this same Hahnemann-based principle process of precise dilution with succussion in between. And so the way any homeopathic is rated is by how many times it has been through that process. If you go to the health food store, what you're going to find is a homeopathic marked either 6x or 30, and that means it's diluted 6 times or 30 times, okay? Those are very, very mild potencies because they haven't been diluted very many times. They sell those in the health food store where anyone can buy them without any education, because at that low potency, they also can do absolutely no damage whatsoever. And so they're 100% safe to sell at those dosages. As you get into the higher potencies, which means more diluted, okay, you can do damage if you do this incorrectly. And so the trick for most of us is we're looking at this from like a family-based homeopathy point of view, is where is like that magic middle where something is diluted enough time to have some serious healing power, but is not diluted so many times that there's really any danger to it. And what I have found is that magic range is a 200 C dilution. Okay, so all my homeopathics in my house, for the most part, there's very rare exceptions, but for the most part, 99% of all the homeopathics in my house are a 200 C. That is what I consider the basic potency that I work with. If you go back to one of the less intense potencies that you get at the health food store, you're simply going to have to administer it a lot more often to get the same effect, but you can if you do it more often. But 200 C is kind of that magic middle. And so that's where I tend to work the most often. Okay, any questions? Questions at that point? I need to make sure that I can do the chat box every once in a while. Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and keep on going, and if you have a question that comes up, feel free to intervene. Okay, now, here's one of the challenges we end up with homeopathy. Because these things have been diluted so many times that you can't see anything under a microscope anymore, our little Western thinking minds that have been trained to not believe anything we cannot see tend to think this must be bogus, right? Because we can't see it. We can't put it under a microscope. We can't see it with our eyes. It's not like being able to do a surgery. It's not like being able to do a blood test. And it's hard for us to believe something that we can't see. But here's what I really want you guys to understand tonight. This is science. And here's why. Okay, I put up a little graph for you guys of the scientific method. You guys all studied this in school. You know what this is, even if you've forgotten. This is what is considered the protocol to go through to establish something by the method of science. Okay, so we have a problem or a question. We come up with a theory of how it can be addressed. We create an experiment that has only one variable. That's the key. It has to be an experiment with only one variable so that then when we look at the data, we can conclusively prove whether that single variable did what we thought it would do or did not do what we thought it would do. From that, we can draw our conclusions, and then we create what's considered a scientific theory, which is the conclusions from the data of our experiment. The better we do that process, the better science that we have. And this is the exact process that Samuel Hahnemann went through with homeopathics. He took all of these substances, his poor family were the guinea pigs, okay? His poor family and friends. He would take all of these substances and he would give them to them and say, this is, I want to forward this slide here because this is what this makes me think of. Why is my slide not forwarding? There we go. You know that scene in Princess Bride where they hook the guy up to the machine and he puts him through this horrid process, and then at the end he says, so tell me, how do you feel? Right? And the guy can't even respond. He's like, oh. This is what Samuel Hahnemann did, okay? He took all of these substances and he gave them to people, family, friends, anyone he could get, as many people as he could get. And then he documented every symptom they felt from these substances. And he did it again and again and again until there was a conclusive pile of data on every symptom that these homeopathics would create in a well person. And by knowing what they would create, the symptoms they would create in a well person was how he knew what they would heal in a sick person. And if you want to know the serious science this is the book. Okay, well, I'll show you this again at the end, but this is considered the textbook of homeopathy. It's called Nature's Materia Medica. And this goes through every homeopathic and lists every symptom that it is known to treat for every homeopathic out there. Okay, some of these homeopathics will have 10 pages of symptoms that have been documented through the scientific process. Some of them only have one. It depends on how much it's been used, how much it's been documented. But this is science, guys. There is nothing hokey about this. There is nothing random about this. Despite the fact that you can't see it under a microscope, this process of homeopathy has been through an incredibly scientific, precise proving process so that we know, we are lucky enough 300 years later to know exactly what these homeopathics do, most of them. And that's a huge, huge blessing. So please keep in mind, this is incredibly scientific. And if you run into people who say otherwise, who say this is a hoax, this is placebo, this is, and we'll talk a little bit about that tonight too, but if you run into these, they just don't know. They just literally don't know how homeopathics work. Because once you get into the serious science of how this works, there's no way you could think that. It is science, and it's been done by a very scientific process. So then the next question is homeopathy uncommon or weird? And the answer is absolutely not. This is the second most widely used system of medicine in the world. Okay, this is not weird. It is this is very common. It just happens to be that about 100 years ago, homeopathy was crushed in this country. And if you want a good education in some of the things going on in the United States, you can do your own research and see how that happened. It's very educational. But in a lot of the world, this is still one of the major forms of medicine that is used. It's most common in India, in Europe. In this graphic, you can see where there's homeopathy hospitals, doctors, and where it's commonly used by the public. This says, you know, you can see this quote here: homeopathy cures a larger percentage of cases than any other method and is by far beyond all doubt more economical and the most complete medical science. And having used this now daily for a year and a half, I absolutely agree. Homeopathy can cure more things than any other method that I have found, and it is safer, faster, cheaper. There is just no reason for this not to be one of our major forms of medicine, except for the fact that it's competition for the other medical forms that are out there, and that of course is a problem. So how is this different from other forms of medicine? Okay, this may be the most important thing that we talk about tonight, because you've got to learn how to kind of stand on your head and look at illness from a completely different perspective than you ever have before. Homeopathy works literally opposite of most medicine. And so you've got to learn to look at it differently. So here are 4 ways, okay? 4 ways that homeopathy differs from other forms of medicine. And in most cases, it's a complete opposite. So let's look at these in their specifics, okay? Number 1, it is based on the law of similars. Okay, so let's teach you what this means. In what we consider modern Western medicine, it's based on the law of contraries, which means we treat something by giving it the opposite. So if you have constipation, we treat it by giving you diarrhea, right? We give you something to induce diarrhea to solve the constipation. That's how we do it. We treat everything by inducing the opposite of the initial symptom, okay? The problem with this is that we didn't cure whatever was the underlying problem that created the symptom in the first place. So it's going to reappear. And we've also now created side effects because we've induced an opposite problem into the body. And that opposite is going to line up correctly with this one symptom, meaning they're supposedly going to cancel each other out, right? The constipation and the diarrhea are going to cancel each other out and hopefully give you a normal bowel movement. But the problem is when you induce a biological shift in the human body, it doesn't just happen in one place. You've now shifted biological functions across the human body. And so we end up with what we call side effects, which are all the other changes that are now messed up in the human body because of the new problem that we deliberately induced in order to try to counteract the underlying problem. Okay? Does that make sense? Shake your hand if you understand that that's how we traditionally in the United States treat a problem. Okay? Now, here's how homeopathy turns this completely upside down. Homeopathy works by what's called the law of similars. And that is that like cures like. We aren't going to look for an opposite to cure the problem. We're going to look for something the same to cure the problem. And so that's what Samuel Hahnemann discovered, right, is that something that is going to induce a symptom is also the same thing that's going to solve that same symptom. Like cures like. And so most homeopathics do the opposite of what they were originally created from. So you can take a poison, right? Something that in a plant, let's say it's a poisonous plant that's going to make me deathly ill. And now as a homeopathic, it will treat those same deathly ill symptoms. If I have a plant or a substance that would originally create inflammation in the body, then turn it into a homeopathic and it's going to treat inflammation. There's a lot of plants that create gastritis, intense abdominal issues, but as a homeopathic, they treat intestinal issues. Same with toxicity, okay? If you've got mercury poisoning, you're probably going to end up using a homeopathic of a heavy metal to remove that toxicity from your body, because like cures like. Okay, let me give you a personal example of this. Okay, so I told you guys earlier in the class that I had to have a chunk of my colon removed when I was in my 20s. And years later, I started having intestinal obstructions on a very regular basis in the place where I have my, where they took out my colon and where it was stitched back together. There's obviously a lot of scar tissue there from that surgery, and I would get these horrific intestinal obstructions. Now, if any of you have ever had an intestinal obstruction, you will know it is one of the worst things that can happen. Most people I know who've done that said they would rather go through labor 10 times than go through one of these. It's a horrible thing. It is life-threatening. And I have probably done that now close to 100 times in the last several years. And nothing that I could do, I could not stop it. And I'd even been to the ER. There's nothing they can do about it. They're like, oh, you have a lot of scar tissue. I'm like, thank you. That was really helpful. I knew that. But there's nothing I could do. I wasn't able to shut those down with herbs. I wasn't able to get rid of them through any of the other tools that I had. It just kept recurring until I found 2 homeopathics. And I have to use those 2 homeopathics together, which is not usually what you do, but in this case, it's what I have to do. I've experimented a lot. And those 2 homeopathics will shut down those obstructions. Okay, here's what those 2 are. Arsenic, okay, which is going to create gastritis, and a plant called podophyllum, which is a toxic plant that creates gastritis. And together, if I use those 2 substances, I can now stop those intestinal obstructions when they start, which I cannot even begin to tell you what a godsend that is, because they are such a horrific experience. 2 toxic substances, as that in their own right would create that kind of abdominal problem, will, as a homeopathic, completely stop that kind of problem. Isn't that amazing? Like, you have to experience it before you can start to just, I mean, the awe of watching it in action is absolutely astounding. Okay, now I'm going to stop. I heard someone for a minute. Did someone need to unmute themselves and ask a question? Okay, will this work with food allergies? Yes, you can treat food allergies with homeopathy, but you aren't necessarily just treating it with the homeopathic of the substance you're allergic to. Sometimes you do that, but homeopathics work by the principle of similars, not exacts. And so very often you're using something similar, but not exact. We'll also talk as we get a little farther into here on constitutional based treatments, which is very often what you're going to use for allergies, especially if there are multiple allergies involved. So we'll come back to that and look at that in more depth as we go. Okay, now here's my next favorite principle of homeopathy that makes it so powerful. And that is that it permanently removes the whole tendency to whatever that symptom was. It treats it in the moment, but it's actually going in and telling your body, we have an underlying imbalance here that's causing this symptom to pop up a lot or creating a weakness where this symptom can be induced a lot. Let's go in and let's fix the underlying problem so that this quits happening. It's like repairing the substructure in your foundation instead of putting a patch over it to try to stop the leak. You literally are repairing the crack that allowed the leak to happen in the first place. And so here's what happens with homeopathy. You have, let's say you have a recurring symptom like my intestinal issue, okay? Each time that happens, I take this homeopathic combo that I have found works for my particular situation, okay? So I take this combination, it shuts down the problem. But at the same time it shuts down the immediate problem, it is teaching my body not to do that next time. And so the time between which those happen and the severity at which they happen just keeps decreasing until they quit. So the other super cool thing about homeopathy is you never treat anything permanently. You will never treat anything with homeopathy for the rest of your life, ever, 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 ever. Because what homeopathy is going to go in and do is it's going to help you in the immediate time when you're experiencing this symptom, and it's going to teach your body how to fix the underlying problem so it quits doing it in the first place. And so you will always use a homeopathic less and less and less often as you go through the process, because your body will need it less and less until you never need it again, which is just so cool. It's literally pointing to your body and telling it what it needs to change at a core level to really heal the problem from the bottom up. And so treatment with homeopathy is always temporary. The effects are not. The effects become permanent. Oh, so cool, so cool. I love it. Okay, so here's reason number 2 that homeopathy is the opposite of what we're used to. You really need to understand this because a lot of you are asking about specific diagnoses, okay? So here's what you need to understand. Treatment is based on symptoms, not diagnoses. Always, always, always. Okay, this is a law of homeopathy. So here's an example of how this works, I guess, or why this works. Okay, so my husband was at work one day and he had an intern who was working for him. And this intern was having tons of abdominal pain. And it had just been getting worse and worse. And it was so bad that for the last month, she'd hardly been able to eat. The number of foods she could eat without hurting was just shrinking. And she had gotten to the point that there was hardly anything left that she could eat. But she didn't have health insurance, right? She was an intern. She wasn't a full-time employee. She did not have health insurance. She had already been to the doctor twice. The doctor had said, we're not quite sure what to tell you because we can't tell what's wrong, right? They couldn't put a diagnosis on the problem without a lot more testing. And a lot more testing was going to be things like colonoscopies, MRIs, things that were extremely expensive. And she didn't have insurance to cover them, nor did she have the income to kind of cover that kind of thing. So she knew, she and I have not had a lot of contact, but she knew I did holistic healing kinds of things. And so she came to my husband, she said, is there anything your wife can do? Does she have any suggestions? And so she and I talked and she described her symptoms to me, okay? Did she have a diagnosis? No. We had no idea what the reason was for her pain, okay? It could have been an intestinal obstruction. It could have been SIBO or a bacterial imbalance. She could have been having gallbladder issues where not enough bile was getting to her abdomen to digest the food properly. There's a whole lot of things that could have been going on to create the symptoms that she was experiencing. But what I love about homeopathy is it does not matter You don't need to know why someone is hurting or what is wrong. In fact, having a diagnosis will often get in your way, because what you need to focus on is the symptoms, okay? So what she needed to tell me was, what did the pain feel like? When did it occur? What things made it better? What things made it worse? We needed to focus completely on symptoms and symptoms alone, okay? Diagnosis was irrelevant. I gave her a homeopathic, one of the ones I used for my own attacks, okay? I gave her podophyllum, which is a key abdominal pain homeopathic. Doesn't work for everything, as you'll see as we go through, but really good one for a lot of abdominal issues. So I said, try this, see what happens. Worst that's gonna happen is nothing, okay? The other thing I love, the worst that's gonna happen is nothing, so give this a try. You guys, she tried it one time and her pain was gone. No MRIs, no colonoscopies. It never even mattered what the original problem was, because homeopathics are based on symptoms. Can you imagine how much time and money it takes when you do not have to slap a diagnosis on things? Okay. Now let's look at this from another way. So then I had a neighbor, and she had a daughter, a baby with rotavirus. Okay, this baby had been crying in abdominal pain for 2 weeks on and off. Okay, it would get better and then it would get worse and whatever. And finally one day she calls me and she's like, do you have a homeopathic? I gave her podophyllum. Rotavirus done. 1 dose. Okay, 1 dose, her baby went back to laughing, never cried again. Those diagnoses were not remotely the same, but they needed the same homeopathic because the symptoms were the same. Okay, so you're always going to match a homeopathic to a symptom. You are not going to even use, or diagnosis is irrelevant. So you can have 2 people with completely different diagnoses but the same symptom, and they're going to use the same homeopathic. Or you're going to have 2 people with the same diagnosis, but their symptom picture is not exactly the same, and they're going to need different homeopathics. Which is why I can't tell you, you use, and no one can, you can't say, well, you use this homeopathic for autism, and you use this homeopathic for fibromyalgia, and you can't do it. Because you can't use a homeopathic based on a diagnosis. What you have to get is a very accurate symptom picture, and that's what we're going to teach you kind of how to go about looking at today. So here's why this is opposite of what most of us are used to with medical treatment. I had a doctor describe to me once what they are trained to do in medical school, okay? Here's the 1-sentence description of what a doctor is trained to do in medical school. They're trained to look at a set of symptoms, know from that set of symptoms what tests to run in order to label it with a diagnosis. And once it's labeled with a diagnosis, how to match that diagnosis to a drug to manage the symptoms. Okay, that's medical school. List of symptoms, what tests do you run, what diagnosis do you add, and then what drug do you match it to. Do you notice there's nothing in there about curing disease? Okay. It doesn't fix anything. It's just slapping Band-Aids on things. But what a homeopathic does is it takes the symptom picture to match a homeopathic to go in and find the underlying weakness that allowed those symptoms to develop in the first place and fix it. And you can do that without ever knowing what the underlying weakness was. Is that beautiful, or is that beautiful? It's incredibly time and money saving. It's just an amazing thing. Okay, any questions there? Kristen, can homeopathics help with physical ailments, a sore knee, psoriasis? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Totally, yeah. All of those, it can help. But there's going to be more to the picture that you're going to have to identify than just that your knee is sore. okay, or just that you have psoriasis. You're going to have to get the whole picture of what's going on to help you pick the right homeopathic, because 2 people with knee pain could need 2 different homeopathics. Same with psoriasis, okay? Stephanie, let's come back to that at the end, okay? So that we don't get confused here as we go. But yes, let's remind me to address that at the end. Okay, here's principle number 3, where homeopathics are upside down for what you're used to. Okay, less is more. This is really, really important. If there is something that I was doing wrong the most before I got more education, and more doctors who had given me homeopathics were doing wrong, it was this one. Okay, this is the easiest one to do wrong. Okay, there's a typo. It should say unlike herbs or drugs. You don't need prolonged or frequent dosage. So if a doctor hands you, or any kind of holistic practitioner hands you a homeopathic and says, take this every day for the next 2 weeks, don't listen to them. Say, bye. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, that's not how homeopathics work. Okay, you don't do them for prolonged periods of time, and you don't do frequent dosage, and you never set a frequency up front, because it's going to be completely based on the symptoms of the person as they go. So I know a lot of holistic practitioners who will, someone brought up allergies, for example, will test for allergies, okay? And they'll say, okay, you're allergic to this, 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 and this. Here's a homeopathic for those things. Go home and take this every day for a month and come back. It's not how homeopathics work, okay? So if someone is doing that, they do not understand the laws of homeopathy. That isn't how it works. So the way that dosing with homeopathics works is you do an initial dose, and that can sometimes be 1, sometimes up to 3 times, okay? Somewhere between 1 and 3. You're gonna take this homeopathic 1 to 3 times, and then you're gonna wait and see what happens. You've got to give the body, sometimes you've got to give the body time, because it's going in and fixing at a core level, right? There will be 3 things that will happen. Either nothing will happen, will get worse, or you will get better, okay? If nothing happens, you don't have the right homeopathic. If you get worse, this is what's called a healing crisis, we'll talk about in a minute, and you've got the right homeopathic, but you're gonna have to stick it out a little bit before you feel better, okay? Or you're going to feel better fairly quickly, in which case you're going to know you have the correct homeopathics. If you start to feel better, you do not take that homeopathic again until you get worse again. When symptoms reappear, you redose. But when you are feeling better, you do not continue to dose with a homeopathic. And that's why it's so inappropriate for someone to give you a homeopathic and say, take this every day for the next month, or take this every 3 days for the next 3 weeks. It doesn't work that way. You have got to watch your body, and at the first sign of improvement, you stop dosing. Okay? So if you're treating a child who is lying on the couch, right? We're going to talk about my daughter who's lying on the couch with the flu, and the first improvement you see is they just sit up, you stop, okay? You don't keep dosing. That means you've got it, the body is working, it's repairing, and you leave it alone. If you see the fever spike again, or you see them lay back down and get lethargic again, then you redose, okay? And then we have to review again, as part of the less is more. The more diluted it is, the more potent it is. And the more potent it is, the more careful you have got to be in using it, because when you get to the super potent versions, you can induce symptoms in a healthy person if you use them inappropriately. You really don't have to be afraid of that at the 200 C dosage, which is why I stay at around the 200 C dosage. Okay, because you don't really have to worry about that. But when you get into the higher potencies, you do. Okay. You know, the other thing that's so nice about this, you know, that I love is because less is more, it takes less of your time. I shared on Facebook today, but for those of you who didn't see it, one of my goats got bronchitis this week. My husband is out of town for 2 weeks. I am taking care of 3 kids by myself, 7 goats, 10 chickens, 11 puppies. Our house is a little insane at the moment. And to say I'm barely holding the fort together is, you know, an understatement. So when I had a goat come down with bronchitis, I was like, oh, I do not have time for this. Now, I do know how to treat bronchitis with herbs. And in the past, that's what I would have done. But to treat bronchitis with herbs, I would have needed to treat this goat 3 times a day for probably 3 to 5 days with herbs. That is a lot of my time that at the moment I do not have. And so I had to look at this from a homeopathic point of view because I simply did not have the time for the prolonged and frequent dosage that it would have required to solve it with herbs. And so I went about it from a homeopathic. And in that case, it took 2 doses and the goat was fine. So this less is more can just free up your life because you know, those of you who've got chronically ill children or you've got special needs kids or you yourself are dealing with these things and your life is taken up by the constant medical treatments, this stuff can free up your life because all of a sudden you are just giving someone 1 drop of something once in a while and that's all you're doing. So if you are like me and one of those overwhelmed moms who's got so many immense medical cares to take, you know, medical care people to take care of, it's so freeing to get to this less is more. But you've got to make sure that you understand it and you take time to wrap your head around it, because if you do not approach homeopathy with a less is more perspective, you can make things worse. Okay. Sorry, I need to go to the chat box here and see. Okay, we have to go up. Sorry. Okay, can homeopathics help with deficiency situations? Yes. The things very often treated that way are to use mineral homeopathics to treat deficiencies, very, very often. Later in the presentation, will you give examples of the types of questions to ask to identify symptoms? Yes, I will. This flies in the face of using nutrition to fix underlying symptoms. You can eat what you want and take a homeopathic. Thanks. No, that's not true. And that's why when people ask me, do I believe nutrition can fix everything? My answer is always, I do not believe nutrition can fix everything, but I do not believe you can fix anything without nutrition. And the reason for that is, even with homeopathics, you choose how your body functions every time you eat. You teach it how to function every time you eat, and that is a minimum of 3 times a day. And if you are undermining your body's function 3 times a day, every day, I don't care how many homeopathics you use, you will never be able to counteract that. So homeopathics and nutrition work together beautifully. But no, you can't use it to just eat donuts 3 times a day and not have consequences of that. It absolutely will not do that. Not going to work. Okay, Tamara's question, not when we're feeling worse, just when symptoms come back. Okay, so she's clarifying my description there, that you redose when the symptoms come back. If you've gotten to the point that symptoms are improving, symptoms are going away, and then the symptoms recur, that is when you redose. Thank you, Tamara. Audrey, my understanding is that constitutional remedies are an exception to this and are taken for longer periods of time. Yes, they are taken for longer periods of time, but even with that, a homeopath is going to be working with you on a continued basis to assess your reaction to them, to establish how they are given on a long period of time. They are not just going to send you off with a do this for the next year, good luck, because the body's response needs to be taken into account. Okay, Jenny, what are your thoughts on homeopathic to prevent vaccine injury? Jenny, will you come back to that at the end? We need to come back to that at the end. Okay, all right, good. Okay, we'll keep going. this is going to be a long class, but that's fine. I want to give you as much information as we can. Okay, so principle number 4. The last way that homeopathics flip our traditional medical thinking on their head. How much you give makes no difference. How fun is that? So people will ask, how much do I take? It doesn't matter. Take 1 drop, take 2 cups, the effect will be the same. Makes no difference. None. Okay? That racks our little medical pharmaceutical brains. Like, we're like, how can that be true? But the way that a homeopathic works is it teaches your body to do something based on the potency of the homeopathic. Remember, that's how many times it's been diluted, and how often you take it. Those are the 2 things that are telling your body what to do. The amount that you take each time you take makes no difference. Okay, so you see this little picture of this boy getting his homeopathic in a liquid form. Okay, so I use liquids. I'll explain why in a little bit. You can use pellets if you want. I prefer liquids, and I'll explain why. But if you're giving a liquid homeopathic, this is exactly how I do it with my kids. I tell them to tip their head backwards, open their mouth, and I just put drops in. You don't want to touch the dropper to their tongue, okay, because then you're contaminating the homeopathic. So you just hold it above and you drop it in. If 1 drop goes in, it works. If an entire dropper full goes in, it works. It doesn't matter. But it does matter whether I give that to them 3 times that day or once. That matters. Okay? So frequency matters, potency matters, amount, absolutely irrelevant. So you might as well use as little as you can because you don't need more. All right? Okay, so those are the 4 reasons that it's hard for us to wrap our heads around homeopathy. And if you see or you hear a lot of criticisms of homeopathy, it's honestly just because people can't wrap their heads around this, right? It's operating by similars instead of opposites. That's hard for us to wrap our heads around, okay? It's based on a symptom, not a diagnosis. That goes against our entire medical programming. You're doing it with less is more, which goes against our entire familiarity with treating things. And then how much you give makes no difference. If you tell those 4 things to some poor doctor who's been just absolutely trained in one way of thinking, they're going to tell you you're nuts, but you're not nuts. It's just a completely different way of approaching healing. Just because it's opposite doesn't make it wrong. In fact, because it's opposite, it's why it allows it to do things that modern medicine cannot do. Okay, questions on those 4 things? Anything I have not explained sufficiently or that has been confusing? I don't want anyone to be, I don't want anyone to be confused.
Angie, could you explain the scenario again when you take a homeopathic and your symptoms get worse? Like, you know you've taken the right one, but you just need to hold on a little bit longer. Like, yeah. What do you mean by that?
So if your symptoms actually get worse, that's actually a sign that you've got the right homeopathic. If it's been well chosen, right, you know, you've gone through the right process, you can have a worsening of symptoms before it gets better. And that is true of any holistic healing method. It's called a healing crisis. And it's because your body's digging up the problem to get rid of it. And so you can have a reappearance of symptoms that you had in the past because your body's working backwards and it's dealing with things that are in the past, right? That now it's got to bring them back up and fix them because they didn't get fixed when they originally should have been. Or you're going to have an increase of symptoms because your body is actually dealing with the issue. So it should be temporary, okay? We're talking a couple days, maybe a week. We're not talking months of something getting worse. Just healing crises are almost always less than a week, especially if you know how to support the body through a healing crisis. So it's a temporary thing.
And then how do you know, like, when to take the next dose when you do have a worse reaction?
If you're having a worsening reaction, you're probably dealing with a constitutional homeopathic. So let's talk about that a little more when we get to constitutional treatment, because it is different than acute symptoms. Okay. Okay. So yeah, 1 dose drop per dose is sufficient. Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'll try to move through this kind of quickly, but there's some, this is where I want to share some of the stories from our family that we've experienced in the last year and a half. So you can see this in very specific application. Hey, Alton. All right. So I love how fast homeopathy is. Okay. Here are ones we have seen in our own home. The right homeopathic can stop shock, an asthma attack, or a panic attack in 20 seconds. Okay, that is fast. Now remember, the other benefit that you're going to get, number 2, is that not only is it treating it in the moment, it's now making it less likely to happen again. So one example, my daughter has had respiratory issues her whole life. We got this report when we brought her home from the orphanage. She's had pneumonia like 10 times, asthma, all of these respiratory stuff. We've had twice since she's been here where she started into the wheezing, breathing. I gave her a homeopathic, wheezing stopped. It's happened twice and it hasn't ever reappeared again. Now, that doesn't mean it won't reappear again, but has the frequency absolutely decreased? You bet. We treated that twice and already there's a frequency change in how often that wheezing is happening. So you're just doing this amazing thing. If you're treating these acute symptoms, you're getting very immediate results, and then you're also making it less likely to happen in the future. Okay, let me look and see. Okay, so 2 more examples I'll give you guys of how fast this can work. There again, for those of you who did not see my Facebook post today, the one that shocked me more than any other was when our daughter, 3 months after we brought her home from Thailand, is leveled with the flu. Okay, and I mean that kind of leveled when they do not move, they do not talk, they do not respond. And you start to panic as a parent because your child's no longer crying, no longer complaining. They're just totally passive. And she was to that point, and not only was that concerning, especially because we have so little medical history with her, but we were supposed to get on a plane in 2 days to go play at Disney. I'm like, okay, we've got a problem on multiple levels here. It took me 3 tries to find the right homeopathic. I did not get it right the first time. But on the 3rd try, I got the right homeopathic, and 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That child sat up, asked for food, and ate a full dinner. 5 minutes. And the next day she was normal. And I never gave her another dose because there was never a return of symptoms, right? So I never redosed. 1 dose. Flu gone. 5 minutes. Okay. That even with everything I had seen, that one still blew my mind at the time, and it still does. Like, that is the power we are talking about here. There again, I didn't get it right the first time, but when you get it right, you guys, this stuff is so fast. It is so fast. It's just amazing. Here's a couple other examples from our family of the long-term benefit that you get from treating an acute symptom. You guys have asked about food issues, okay? One of my sons has always had digestive reactions to oats. It's not an allergy. His body just doesn't digest them correctly. And if you know anything about incomplete digestion, you know that when your body does not digest something completely, you get gas. That's what gas means, that you have an appropriately digested food. So he would always get gas when he ate oats, and he really liked some treats that had some oats in it that we would make at home. But I did them very rarely because they would just upset his system, and he would get gas. So after I'd learned about homeopathy, he had some oats and he got gas, and we gave him, in this case, you guys are probably trying to keep lists. You don't need to, but in this case, it was one called Carbo Veg, which is the homeopathic of charcoal. And it stops the gas from the oats. Like, it was fine. Gas done very quickly, over, no more symptoms. We've done that a couple times and he no longer gets gas from oats. So I haven't retreated that now in quite a while because he is not getting the gas again. So this is just, it's so cool that you can treat something and fix it at the same time. It's just amazing. Okay. But here's the other thing you have got to understand. This is not good business. Okay. If you go to business school, what you're trained to do is make people dependent on you, because when people are dependent on you, you make the most money. Okay. So the pharmaceutical industry is built to make you need a prescription for the rest of your life, because that is what makes money. Homeopathics don't. They are never permanent. And so it's not good business. So if you want to know why homeopathics are not commonly used in the United States of America, there you have it. They have been driven out of use by those who have a lot of money to lose, because these don't make a lot of money. They just don't. They're cheap in the first place and you don't need them very long. And so it's not good business. So please keep in mind that if the whole country gets educated and starts using homeopathics, there are people with a lot to use, a lot to lose. And they're going to be fighting it, and they're going to be fighting it hard. Okay, Alicia, how long did you wait in between the first two to know they weren't the ones? Probably an hour. No improvement at all. Figured I didn't have it right. How do these work for chronic conditions like Epstein-Barr virus? There again, that will be under constitutional. So we'll come back to that again. Okay, number 3, this one's really nice. We've talked about this. They require very little of your time and effort, and the person doesn't have to be cooperative. How many of you have tried to pour medicines down your kid's throat they didn't want to take? Okay. Homeopathics, it doesn't matter. Your child, your goat, whomever, can be completely uncooperative, and all you have to do is drop a drop of that on their skin and you're done. Like, they don't have to cooperate. And this is where liquids are better than pellets. If you have the little pellets that you often see homeopathics, which is just the liquid that's been put on a pellet, which makes it easier to travel with and things like that. But you have to put the pellet under your tongue and hold it there and let it dissolve. That's harder with an uncooperative person. If you have a liquid, you just drop, mouth, great. That's always what I try for first. But if you can't get it in their mouth, who cares? Put it anywhere you can get it. I put it on my goats' noses. That's always where I put it, on my goats. You've just got to get contact. And so for uncooperative kids, this is huge. I'll tell you one place we have seen this with our children. I have one child, my one who's on the spectrum, that foods affect him hugely. We have to control this child's diet enormously, but it literally makes him a different kid. He is a child where if I had not altered the diet, he would have been institutionalized by this point. Controlling our diet, we can keep him calm and keep him at home and keep life livable. It's that big of a factor. So when he gets a food that does not agree with his symptom system, his behavior gets violent and it goes crazy, and it is not pretty. And it has taken me a while to find the right homeopathic to shut those down, but we have found it. And now when he is exposed to a food and his behavior goes crazy, there is a homeopathic we can give him that stops that in about 5 minutes. Okay, if you are a special needs mom, that is a big, big, big deal. And he doesn't have to be cooperative. He doesn't have to swallow a pill. He can be hitting me and I can just drop that on his skin somewhere. So that is a huge advantage. Okay, what about things that are slow to heal, like broken bones, acne, eczema? Do you dose until they heal? let's come back to that one at the end too, so we don't get too sidetracked here. I just want to make sure we've got time to get through all of our content, and then I'll be happy to answer all the questions. Okay. It's cheap. This is self-explanatory. A homeopathic costs around $5. Cheap, 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 cheap. That's just a huge advantage. It always fixes more than you are intending to fix. This is such a beautiful, beautiful, fun thing. A homeopathic is holistic, okay? It's always going to heal emotional symptoms and physical symptoms at the same time. And it's always going to heal more than you think, okay? So an example for me with this is the first thing I ever tried to solve with homeopathy was headaches that I would get. They were emotionally driven. I knew that. I knew the exact emotion that triggered these headaches. And despite the fact that I knew the emotion, and I have a lot of tools with dealing with emotional issues, I had not been able to unravel this one, and it was driving me bonkers. That I could not fix it. It was driving me crazy. And so when I first got my training in homeopathy, I knew that was number one on my list. I was going to get these stupid headaches that were driving me crazy. And I was brand new to homeopathy. This took me a while. Okay. It took me a while to find the right one. But when I found it, I had a whole bunch of things that got better, and emotional things that got better, all sorts of things. And here's the funniest one, okay? Because this one's just funny. But as we get to the questions to ask to find the right homeopathic, this gives you a hint of how all of these things work together in a person. I have always had a insatiable craving for the ocean. Like, I never have been able to get there often enough. I would always plan any vacation I could to involve the ocean. And when we would go, I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning while everyone was still sleeping and go and just stand in the ocean for hours. Like, I never could get enough of the ocean. There was something to the energy and everything of the ocean that just was so filling and healing to me. But it wasn't like it ever completely filled my tank. I always wanted more. Well, here's the funny thing. The homeopathic that fixed my headache is called Nat Muir, okay? That's salt. It's the homeopathic for salt, okay? Minerals are some of the most key homeopathics. After I used the Nat Muir, that insatiable need for the ocean has been gone. It fixed it. Whatever was the underlying imbalance in me that was causing these symptoms, it's like my body recognized it when I went to the ocean, right? And it was like, that right there, that's what we need. We need that right there. And it was screaming at me that that's what I needed. And once I use the homeopathic, I can take the ocean or I can leave it. It's really interesting. Like, I still like it, but no compulsion to visit the ocean anymore. So interesting. So when you find the right homeopathic, you're going to end up fixing things you didn't know you were trying to fix. And that's one of the ways to know that you have gotten the right one. Okay. Okay, number 6. Sorry, I'll check my chat box here real quick before I go to number 6. The ocean's full of salt. Yeah, I know. Interesting, isn't it? You guys, your body is so smart. It knows what you need always. It's just we have a hard time interpreting this, what our body is trying to tell us. But yeah, it had told me what I needed a long time ago. I just didn't know how to give it what it needed. Okay, so number 6. This, if I was only going to teach one thing for homeopathics, it would be this. It is the most effective thing I have ever seen for mental, emotional health and trauma. We have a world that is experiencing emotional and mental illness at an epidemical, that's probably not the right word, right? An epidemic level that I don't think has ever been seen in the history of the world. And this is so powerful. You guys, there is a homeopathic for depression with suicidal thoughts. It's called Aurum Metallicum. If the world only had one homeopathic, can you imagine how much good that homeopathic could do. Just that one. Now, this is the thing I have constructed the most lists and charts of anything, because this is what I was trying to make sure I knew backwards and forwards before we went to Thailand. So for those of you who are taking the whole 6-week course, we're going to spend an entire week just on the specific homeopathics for mental and emotional health and anxiety, depression, trauma, all of that kind of stuff, because there again, you've got to get the right picture for the right person. You guys, these are huge. Let me just tell you some of mine, okay? I really struggle with this stuff and always have my whole life. I have lived with chronic anxiety and depression my whole life, even before I knew what the words were to describe what I was dealing with. And I found supplements that have helped, diet has helped, I found tools that have helped, I found lots of things that have helped, but they haven't gotten rid of the problem, right? They're management techniques. And homeopathics aren't. Homeopathics are cures. And they're not instant cures, but they are cures. There again, you take them in the crux of the symptom, it helps the symptom in the immediate time, and then it makes it less likely to happen again. And so you need it less and less and less and less over time until it's gone. There are homeopathics for every different type of anxiety. Like, I have them charted out because I didn't know what we'd need in Thailand. But every different type of anxiety and depression that there is a homeopathic for it. Okay. And they work incredibly fast. Like, I'm not kidding you that they can stop a panic attack if you get the right one. They can stop racing thoughts. They can stop suicidal I'm sorry guys, I can't talk. Suicidal thoughts. Okay. These can be used for things as severe as schizophrenia. Okay. And paranoid delusions and things. This stuff is powerful for mental, emotional health and trauma in a way I have not seen with anything else I have ever found. Okay. You guys have asked about chronic issues. Yes, homeopathics work for both acute and chronic issues, but you do approach it differently. Okay. So like in my kids, there's the homeopathic that we're using for the meltdown, right? When my son's blowing up because his body has been stressed out and all his behavior goes crazy. But there's a different way we're approaching homeopathics for the underlying behavioral and long-term developmental issues. And they aren't necessarily the same homeopathic. Sometimes your acute symptoms and long-term will be treated by the same homeopathic, but they aren't always. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Number 8, it cures things that are incurable. Now, I'm going to get on my soapbox for 1 second, okay? Here is the biggest lie you will ever hear about health. That is that something you have is incurable. That is never true. What that means is that the person you are talking to doesn't know how to cure it. That's what that means. It doesn't mean it's incurable. Those are two completely different things. Please, 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 no matter what health issues you're dealing with and no matter how you choose to deal with them, please understand that. The human body is built to heal and it needs help to heal, but there aren't things that are incurable. There aren't. It's just, do we know how to do it or do we not? You know, my intestinal obstruction story I told you is an example of that. Okay, there is nothing medical science could do. They told me there's no fix for this. Ha! No, there was no fix they knew for that. We're treating dyslexia in one of my children with homeopathy. Okay, that's something medical science would tell you there's no medical fix for. Ha! Another one I am still in the throes of, I will tell you this is not solved. I have not solved every problem that I have yet. I am dealing with osteomyelitis, which if you guys know is a stinker to cure. That is an infection that is in the bone. And when it is in the bone, it's almost impossible to cure because nothing can get into the bone to cure it. So even if you use antibiotics, even if you use herbs, there is not enough blood supply to the bone for those to get into the bone in any concentration to actually kill the infection. So we're using homeopathy, and we're trying to figure out how to do that with homeopathy. I don't have that one solved yet, but I am confident that there are not things in this world that are incurable. It just means we need to learn more. That's all it means. Okay, there are no drug interactions with homeopathy. This is big because if you are in the world of holistic health, if you use herbs and supplements and other things, those do interact with drugs and medical treatment. And you need to tell your doctor any supplements, vitamins, herbs you are taking because of those interactions. Homeopathics, no. You can put them on top of any medication. They are fabulous for helping you heal from surgery and dental procedures way faster because you can just add them on top. You don't have to not do any medical treatment you're being given. You can add them right on top and you can increase your body's healing tremendously. And then if you're on a prescription medication, you can just gradually lessen the prescription as you need less, because the underlying problem is being addressed. But you never have to fear adding a homeopathic to any other medical issue. And you don't even have to tell your doctor if you don't want to, because it doesn't make any difference. It's not going to interfere with anything he's doing other than in the long run, maybe make him unemployed. That's the worst it can do. Let's see, let's go back here and check my chat box. Do you have to be credentialed to offer homeopathics? It depends on where you live, and there's all sorts of different things. Homeopathics are being targeted by by modern medicine for obvious reasons, and being tried to be shut down. So how that's going to change in the future, I don't know. But to do this with your family, anyone can do this with your family. To be a practicing homeopath is extensive education. It's medical school, 4 to 7 years of school to be a homeopath. I say, right? We're talking major textbooks, okay? It's in-depth science. So if you hire a homeopath, you're hiring someone who's been through the equivalent of medical school on a homeopathic approach. But do you have to have training to go buy these and use them and help your family and your friends? Not where I live. But you're going to want to be careful. There are a lot of medical regulations about things. So yeah, you're going to want to be careful. Okay. Will these have an outline? For those who are in the full course, the outlines are posted in the sources for the entire course. Julia? Okay, how would you wean off blood pressure medications? I legally cannot touch that with a 10-foot pole. You are not allowed, no one is allowed to make any recommendations for medications unless they are a licensed physician. So I can't answer that question, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, Crystal answered that. Thank you, Vicki. That's one of the ones I've looked at. Okay, we got all that covered. All right, so moving on to our last reasons, advantages of homeopathics. There are no side effects. It's not going to create, remember, the way that you get a side effect is by deliberately altering body function, and it creates this cascade of consequences. We are not altering body function. We're giving the body a message to go in and repair something, and simply pointing the body in the right direction to go in and make the repair itself. So there are no side effects to homeopathy, though, as we said, you can have a healing crisis. And last but not least, it's no big deal if you get it wrong, as long as you're working with the lower potencies. And so feel free to practice. As you guys have noticed, I don't get it right every time, especially when I started. And that's okay, because this stuff is cheap and it's simple. And if you don't get it right, nothing terrible happens if you're playing with a 200C or more or less potency. You're going to be fine. So please think of this as practice, right? You are going to be practicing, and that's fine. You know, medical mistakes are either the second or the third leading cause of death in the United States. I don't know where it stands at the moment. That's how many people are killed by a doctor giving them the wrong prescription, the wrong dosage of a prescription. or making a mistake during surgery. It kills more people than almost anything in this entire country. And that's not going to happen with homeopathy. You can play with this, practice with this, and be perfectly safe. So please, please let the fear go out of it and be comfortable with playing. Western medicine is nothing but practicing. Yes, they call it medical practice for a reason. That's what it is. Whoa, that was fun. Let's go back. Okay, so if there's that many advantages to homeopathy, you're probably wondering, so why haven't I heard about this? There's got to be a downside, right? There's really only two that I have found. There are two downsides to homeopathy, okay? The first is there isn't a one size fits all. And we have been so programmed to, for this disease, take this pill, that when I tell you, well, if you tell me you have this disease, I can't just tell you what homeopathic to take. You're going to probably be frustrated at first. Or people will listen to my story and say, oh, what did you use for that? And I have to say, well, I can tell you what I used for that, but that doesn't mean it's going to work for you, because that's not how homeopathics work, okay? They're going to be looking at this big, big, big picture, and it's going to be different for different people. And that, I think, really is the main reason that homeopathics are not used more, because they take some practice and they take some education to find the right one. And some people just don't like that. They want just the absolute, no responsibility, no discussion kind of prescriptive approach to life. And that's fine. If that's what people want, they can use that. But if you're willing to take a little bit more uncertainty to actually solve the underlying problem, then homeopathy is for you. This is why studies don't work for homeopathy, though. Okay, if you start looking into this and you find all these studies saying homeopathics don't work, homeopathics are bunk, okay, a study can't work for homeopathics, because if they line up 200 people with fibromyalgia and they give them all the same homeopathic, it's not going to be the right homeopathic for everybody. It may be for 2 people, and 2 people are going to get better, and then they're going to say that was statistically insignificant. You can't do a pharmaceutical study on homeopathics because they work by opposing principles. So if you see studies debunking homeopathy, just ignore them, because there isn't one size fits all with homeopathy. Anyone who understands homeopathy would understand that a study wouldn't work even before they started it. It takes more skill than that. Okay, and 2, we've talked about, it doesn't generate much money. And that's why you're not hearing about it. It takes a lot of money to advertise for prescriptions. It takes a lot of money to push prescriptions. It takes people who deliver them to your doctor's office and tell them to use them. It takes a lot of money. And if a cure doesn't generate money, it also isn't making the money to create that kind of push. And so the fact that you're not hearing about it is simply because it's cheap. And it's not creating a $200 billion a year business. And it's curing people, and so then they quit needing it and they quit buying it, and it just doesn't generate much money. So please understand that there's reasons your doctor doesn't know about this. There's reasons the internet is not going to be promoting this. There's reasons you're not going to see commercials about this. There's very good reasons. It's because it doesn't work like a prescription. And so the only way for people to learn about homeopathics is through an education forum. And that's why I'm trying to do this. This is the only way to get the word out. So you guys, once you understand homeopathics, please spread the word. Teach other people, point other people in the right direction, because it's the only way they're going to learn about it. Okay, should you be scared of homeopathics? Oh, the FDA will tell you that you should, and here's why. One day they will tell you that it's because they're made of dangerous, unregulated substances, right? I took arsenic to treat my intestinal obstruction. That's not safe, right? So they're going to say that's dangerous. And then the next day, what the FDA is going to say is, it's complete fraud because they looked at this under a microscope and there's no arsenic there. So the thing's just fraud. And if it's helping people, it's nothing but placebo effect. Now, here's why this really irritates me. Those can't both be true. If you're going to fight homeopathy, at least pick one, because there's no way they can both be true at the same time. It's like they're completely throwing their own argument under the bus if you pay attention, because either it really has something in it and therefore it's dangerous and it can't be a placebo effect and it can't be a fraud, or there's nothing dangerous about it because there's nothing really in there. So you can't argue both. Like, it's ridiculous. Okay. But I hope you guys understand now, as I've gone through the actual science of how homeopathy works, that you can understand why someone who didn't get themselves educated in the science of homeopathy would think this. Like, it's not an incredibly illogical thought. But if you get enough education to actually understand how homeopathy works, neither of these arguments hold any weight. So these arguments are made by people who do not understand how homeopathy works. So as with all things in this world, get your education from someone who actually understands what they're talking about. Don't let someone teach you about something that doesn't know what they're talking about. That's not a good way to learn anything in this world. Okay. How does it work for cancer? So how does it work for anything? It's going to fix the underlying weakness in that person's body that allowed cancer to develop. Cancer is no different than any disease. We all have cancer cells in us all the time. So the question is, what allowed that cancer to take root and grow instead of the immune system eliminating it? That's the real question. Okay, so what homeopathy is going to do is it's going to be addressing the underlying imbalance in the body that allowed cancer to grow. And so the beautiful thing about that is if you treat cancer with homeopathy, you've decreased the person's chance of getting cancer in the future. And that would be true even if you used homeopathy on top of any other treatments the person was getting, or after any other treatments the person was getting. The homeopathy is going to go in and it's going to deal with the underlying issue. And so you will then be far less likely to get cancer again in the future, whereas conventional cancer treatments actually increase chances of recurrence in the future. That's a very widely documented fact. They may get rid of them in the present, but they increase the rate of recurrence, and homeopathy can help with that. Okay. Are you guys still with me? Is anybody going to sleep? Are you bored, or are we still doing okay? Okay. How do we know this isn't just placebo effect? And I think that is a valid question, right? If you are putting a drop of something on the tongue that is unidentifiable under a microscope, how do you know it's not placebo effect? The answer is simple. It's because not every remedy you try is going to work. It's not that easy always finding the right remedy. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's crystal clear which one you should use, and sometimes it is head-scratchingly hard, and you're going to try and things aren't going to work, and that's how you know it's not placebo effect. When I have my daughter who's got the flu, okay, and she's down and out, and the first two do nothing, and the third one does it like that, that is not placebo effect. If it was placebo effect, the first one would have worked. So to me, that's an easy thing to answer. The way you know it's not placebo is not every homeopathic you try is going to work. And as you get more and more educated, you'll get better and better, and your odds will go up and up. But it's not oh, I took a drop and I just felt better every single time. It doesn't work that way. Okay, I'm sorry, Karen. Sorry, it's so late. Okay, okay, Lyme disease, same thing. Okay, so if you were looking at Lyme disease from a modern medicine perspective, you're trying to kill the Lyme, right? If you're looking at it from a homeopathic point of view, you're trying to figure out, well, what was the weakness in that person's body that allowed the Lyme to really take root and move in? Because it doesn't with everybody. So what do we need to address so that that body is strong enough to tell the Lyme to get lost? And that's how you're going to be able to treat it from a homeopathic point of view. Okay, so how do you choose a remedy? Let me just look at my notes here to make sure I haven't missed any really cool stories I wanted to tell you. Okay, I just have to throw this in. I invented a Disney homeopathic, okay? So any of you who need a Disney homeopathic, here it is, okay? You mix arnica and Caliphos together. Arnica, we'll talk about arnica a little bit. Arnica is the #1 homeopathic for injury, bruising, sprained ankles, you know, and anything where you've just, if you've had a dental procedure and your mouth is sore, okay, any kind of injury like that, arnica is your #1 homeopathic. And you know, I went on this trip with my daughter where we did 4 days, 4 like 16-hour days in a row of Disney. And after pushing her around in a stroller for 2 days, I was dying. Like, I was so tired. I could not stand up and I was so sore. I was just like, this is bad. I'm not going to be able to do this. So I went through my homeopathics and I put together arnica for the pain of just being so sore. And Caliphos is a homeopathic for exhaustion of being pushed beyond your limits. It's a really good combination for Disneyland. So I will just share that with you. Arnica plus Caliphos will get you through a Disney vacation really well. Yeah, an arnica homeopathic is going to work very similar to a turmeric tincture. Yeah, that's an interesting comparison. Yeah. Okay. So how do you choose a remedy? So I just gave you an example, right? So let's talk about how do you choose a remedy. This is the tricky part. This is the part you've got to give yourself some patience and let yourself practice and just get into this and try. You have to look at the symptom picture. You can never pick a homeopathic from a single symptom. Never from a diagnosis and never from a single symptom. So you've got to look at what are the physical symptoms. And you've got to look at emotional symptoms. You've got to look at both. One key thing to look at is what makes it worse or better. There's a lot of times with a homeopathic that what's going to differentiate which is the right homeopathic is it worse at night? Is it worse right when you wake up? Does it get better if you go out in fresh air? Does it? So say we're talking about a cough, right? So if you're looking at all the possible homeopathics for coughs, they're going to say things like, does it get better? This one gets better if they go out in fresh air. This one's worse at night, but non-existent during the day. This one is for a cough that gets better if they take a drink. This one is worse if they take a drink. This one is, so watch for the things that make something better or worse, okay? That's one of the key things you want to pay attention to. And then you need to add in just these miscellaneous, you need to grab every miscellaneous thing you can. You know, sometimes food cravings, what kinds of foods you crave and what kinds of foods you hate will help you identify the right homeopathic. There are homeopathics that it's not, there again, it's not necessarily that you're treating a food craving, but that food craving is part of the underlying imbalance that you're going to treat, right? And then that food craving is going to get better and 16 other things are going to get better at the same time. But very often a food craving will be a clue in. How you deal with temperature is very often a clue in. Are you always hot? Are you always cold? Do you do better going out in cold? Do you do better getting in a warm bathtub? Do you, you know, those kinds of things very often are keys in finding the right homeopathic. Kinds of things that you have reactions to that there again, I guess that kind of falls into the better, worse kinds of things. Fears. Any homeopath you're going to talk to is going to ask you, are there things you are scared of? Fears can be an indication into which homeopathic to use, okay? So you've got to put together a picture, this complete thing of what the whole symptom picture looks like. So if you're coming with arthritis, okay, you need to identify things like, is it just specific parts of the body or is it the whole body? Often a thing to identify is the left or the right side worse? Okay. What things make the inflammation worse? What things make the inflammation better? Okay. What time of day is the worst? All of those kinds of things you're going to need to put together this picture. And that's why two people with arthritis are going to have two different symptom pictures. Do you see what I'm talking about? You may have one symptoms the same, but the picture isn't necessarily going to be the same. You could have one person who's got arthritis where the joints are burning hot. Okay, the person, so that's a key, right? You've got a heat factor that you're going to be paying attention to. And that person is also dealing with extreme anxiety, okay? And that person is always craving carbs, and that person is terrified of spiders. And you could have another person who's got arthritis who is always freezing cold. It's only their shoulders that hurt. It's worse in the winter. It gets better when they crawl into bed at night. They're dealing with depression and discouragement and anger. Two totally different symptom pictures, and therefore two totally different homeopathics that are going to be used to treat them. Okay. So here's an example of what I consider one of the 3 top homeopathics. I'll show you that list here in a minute. Arsenicum album. This is arsenic. Okay. So don't panic. I've taken enough of this stuff to kill me if there was really enough arsenic in there to do anything. But remember, all that's left is the imprint of the arsenic. There actually is microscopically no arsenic left in the homeopathic. Okay, so arsenicum album, here are some of the characteristics of arsenicum album. This I really feel like is common to a lot of people at the moment. So that's why I'm going to show you what the symptom picture of arsenicum album looks like. With arsenicum album, you are almost always dealing with anxiety plus depression plus digestive issues. Okay. If you are dealing with all 3 of those things, arsenicum album is one of the ones you're going to want to look at. The other key indicator for arsenicum album is that you deal with your anxiety by being controlling. Okay, which is absolutely me. The worse my anxiety gets, the more I'm trying to make everything in my life go perfect, because if everything goes perfect and I can control everything, then there's less to be anxious about. And so I get more worked up about what my kids are doing and the things they do wrong. And I get more worked up about all the little things going wrong around me because I'm trying to control everything in order to keep my anxiety in check. That is a absolute arsenicum album kind of anxiety. That's what that picture looks like. And almost always digestive symptoms are the physical symptom that you will see with the anxiety that's an arsenicum album type of anxiety. So that, can you see how that's a symptom picture? So you wouldn't just give arsenicum album to someone because they have anxiety. There's a lot of different types of anxiety. But if you've got someone who's also dealing with depression, digestive issues, and control issues, pretty good bet arsenicum album is going to make their life a lot better, and it can make it a lot better really fast. Like this is the thing with this emotional and mental health thing that just, oh, I wish I could help the whole world know about this, because I know what this feels like. Okay. Just this past weekend, you know, as I told you, my husband's been gone for a long time. I've got a lot going on at home. I had one of my children go into crisis with their issues this week, and my anxiety and exhaustion has gone through the roof. And this weekend, I got to the point where I could not get out of bed without crying. Like the thought of just trying to get up and face another day was more than I could take. I was totally depressed and discouraged. I was snapping at my kids because I was past my coping thing, and I needed nothing to go wrong, right? Because I just could not take one more thing. I could not get through the day without crying. I could not get through the day without being a little bit of a mean mom. It was not pretty, okay? it was not something I could talk myself out of. I was very aware of what was going on. I was very aware of what all the causative factors were, but it didn't change that is my body's wired reaction to that kind of situation. I took an arsenican album, and within 2 hours, I was like, it's gonna be okay. And I smiled at my kids again, and everything got better. And I tell you, if you have experienced that, if you have experienced going from a panic attack or anxiety where all you want to do is lock yourself in your room or hide under the covers, and then you can go to, oh, everything's okay. Oh, it's okay. Like the sunshine's come back out, and you can do that in hours. Like when you have experienced that, I've had times when it's been even faster than that. This time I was deeper down and it took a little while to pull out, but I've had times where the pull out's been even faster. You know, when you have felt that, you know there's so much of the world that is suffering unnecessarily. So much. Our kids, us as adults, just so much suffering that is unnecessary. And like I say, you know, the more I take that remedy, the less often I fall into that place. But when I regress, there's a way to pull back out again. So please, I'll tell people about this. Please. Okay. You're trying to find a remedy that matches as many characteristics as possible. The more complete the match, the more things it's going to heal. Okay, so here's where we start to talk about constitutional treatment. There are two ways to treat with homeopathy. One is you're trying to deal with an acute symptom. Acute meaning it's come on quickly and it's immediate. So a panic attack is an acute symptom, right? Strep is an acute symptom. The flu is an acute symptom. Spraining your ankle is an acute symptom. Breaking a bone is an acute symptom. Having surgery is an acute symptom, okay? So anything that's come on suddenly, you aren't having to find the homeopathic that's going to cure every chronic problem you have. In those moments, what you're trying to find is what is the homeopathic to deal with this immediate symptom at hand? Like right now, here's what I've got. My experience is that with a little practice, very often you can do that yourself. If you're willing to get some education, you're willing to practice with that, very often for acute ones, you can do this yourself. You don't have to have a professional. You don't have to have a license. This is something you can practice, learn. You're going to learn the people in your household, right? And you're going to learn what things they tend to be prone to, which homeopathics they tend to need recurrently. You're going to get a feel for this, okay? A constitutional treatment is to treat the whole person. When you are dealing with a deep-seated chronic issue, this is what you're looking at, okay? You are trying to find the one remedy that most closely resembles the entire individual on all levels. And so it is going to heal to the core. And it is going to heal a lot of things at once. Okay, that is not easy to do. If you think about the fact that a professional homeopath has been to 4 to 7 years of medical school to have this entire book memorized, and to know every characteristic of every homeopathic that's out there, okay, that's not that easy to do. And so I would suggest that if you're dealing with a really chronic issue and you need to treat it on a constitutional level, that you do hire a homeopath. You can't put a price on that kind of education, and the price is usually way less than a doctor's visit. And a lot of homeopaths are going to do things by FaceTime and Skype, so they don't even have to live in the same country as you, which is really handy considering a lot of homeopaths are in other countries. But hire a homeopath, and if you're asking me, do I have one I recommend? No, at this point, I'm just starting to do some hiring with homeopaths, and I don't yet have that kind of endorsement that I can get. If those of you taking this class do, if you've had really good experiences with homeopaths that we could share with other people, please do let me know. And I will pass those on to people, but I don't have a specific recommendation, but so worth it. You know, when you can have one homeopathic that is going to fix an issue you've dealt with for 20 years, or is going to fix 15 issues you've dealt with your whole life at the same time, you know, so worth hiring a homeopath to help you find that constitutional homeopathic that you need. Okay, so she she says, you said a lot of them don't give the right directions on how to use these and that they don't know what they're doing. Okay, well, Tamara, I don't know exactly what you're referring to. I'm sure some conversation we had in our other class. If you, I would not say that if you're getting a professionally trained homeopath that has gone through homeopathy school, that they're not going to know what they're doing. They are going to know what they're doing. I was talking about holistic doctors that dabble in homeopathy. Big difference. When you've got your naturopath that's doling out homeopathic treatments because he's just taken one class or read one, that's not the same thing as a trained homeopath. So when I say trained homeopath, I mean homeopathic medical school. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. They know what they're doing. So where I want you to be careful is where you've got naturopathic doctors that are dabbling in this, but may not really understand what they're doing. Does that clarify that? Holistic versus homeopathic, yes, very different. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. That is a very important clarification. Okay, any other questions on just these general principles? I know that doesn't answer specific things, but on the general principles there, any other questions on how you do that? Okay, so now let's talk about where Google comes into all of this, okay? Here, I'll skip forward a slide and then we'll come back. Okay. If you want the Bibles on homeopathy, they are these two books, okay? They're listed there on your screen, Nature's Materia Medica and Homeopathic Clinical Repertory. These are considered the Bibles of homeopathy. These are medical school level books. Okay, these are not homeopathy for dummies books. These are the medical school level books. They're also expensive. They're like $100 a piece. Okay, so do you need these books to start working with this with your family? And the answer is no, you don't. If you want to get really serious about this, you're probably going to want to buy these books. One of them goes through by symptom and lists the homeopathics that match that symptom. One goes through by homeopathics and lists the symptoms that match that homeopathic. And if you really want to practice homeopathy, you've got to have the two to cross-reference. So that's why there's two different books. But no, you don't need these. Okay, so let's talk about how you do this with Google. All right. Now, first warning, do not use Google to learn about homeopathy. Do not get out of this class and type homeopathy into Google and hit enter. Okay, you need to know that there was a formal business policy change on June 3rd, 2019 to make Google deliberately avoid natural health sites and pull up instead sites that say that natural health solutions are dangerous, frauds, do not work. Okay, so if you type homeopathy, you're going to get a bunch of stuff telling you why this is a bunch of baloney. And that is not, because that is the way Google used to work. Is they used to always rate their searches based on the number of times that result had been used. And so the reason Google was so helpful was the most used sites were always listed first. As of June 3rd, that is no longer true. Okay, money is powerful, people, and Google's algorithms got bought. They are now no longer neutral. And you just need to know that. So don't try to learn about homeopathy in Google, but there is a way you can use Google to help you find homeopathics, okay? what you need to do is type in the main, and here I'm assuming we're dealing with acute issues, not chronic, okay? But let's say your kid's got a cough and you want to treat this cough with homeopathics. So you're going to type in cough homeopathic, okay, into Google, and you're going to hit return. And then what you're going to look for is that a reputable source is going to list around 3 to 10 of the most relevant remedies for that symptom. And along with each one, they're going to tell you how to differentiate which one you need. So it's going to say things like, okay, for coughs, if this is the right remedy, it's going to be a really tight cough with no phlegm coming up that's worse at night. Okay. For this if this homeopathic is the right remedy match, you're going to have a really phlegmy cough where and it's green. And it's worse first thing when they wake up. And if this remedy is the right one, it's going to be a cough that is made better if you take them outside into fresh air. And if does that make sense? So they're going to give you a list of some of the most relevant remedies, and then they're going to give you symptom differences to look for to try to establish which one is the right one. I had a time when 2 of my kids had coughs that were keeping them and us up all night, and we got to about 1 in the morning, and I was like, enough of this. And I started trying different homeopathics for coughs. And there again, took me a couple tries, but for both of them, I was able to shut the cough down completely so that we could sleep through the rest of the night. 2 totally different remedies. Okay, 2 kids, 2 different remedies. So you've got to be willing to look at the differences. I've listed here before you some of the most reputable sources that will often come up. BritishHomeopathic.org, I will tell you, is really good, but boy, they are in depth and they love to get theoretical. So some of the stuff that comes up will be helpful for you if it's just, okay, use this, 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 or this. But a lot of theirs are some of the most in-depth things I've ever seen on homeopathics, and it might be way overkill. So just know that. The other sites often have those kinds of articles as well as here are some of the most relevant remedies for these kinds of symptoms. Okay, so that's how you can Google for homeopathics, but please don't Google homeopathics in general, or you're just going to go into a black hole. Okay, we talked about the books. Okay, where do you buy them? So here's just some of your options. I want you guys to know as many options as you can. You can buy them at the health food stores. I don't really do that very often because, one, the health food stores only have the most common ones and they're very low potency. I just find I don't really very often like dealing with anything less than 200 C in potency. So if you deal with those low potencies, you're going to have to take it every 10 minutes, and that's just too much trouble for me when I know I could give it 200 C and give it to my kid once. So that's why I don't use a health food store very often. If you are part of our 6-week course, we're going to do a group buy as part of that course where we're going to get discounted rates on complete sets. Let me just show you kind of what homeopathics look like in my life. Okay, this is in my purse. This goes everywhere I go, and it's got 10 of what I consider the most relevant homeopathics for my particular family, okay, that we need the most. I have something like this that goes traveling with me that can hold more like 20 homeopathics that are helpful for when I'm traveling. Honestly, when I travel, I usually take more than 20. This is a set of 100. If you want to have a really good set to have just about everything you would need, there is a set of 100 that gives you all the key homeopathics, and that's what that looks like. So those are the kinds of sets we'll be doing together in the course. If you want to kind of put your own set together, Butterfly Express is a great resource for really inexpensive, good homeopathics. You just need to know that they do not list their homeopathics as homeopathics. They list them as blessed waters. And the reason they do that is for pure legal protection should there start to be any action against homeopathics. And so they're listed as blessed waters. It's the same thing, okay? It's a legal protection. But you can still go into their website and type in the traditional Latin name. Most homeopathics are by their Latin name of either the mineral or the plant or whatever. You can type in the traditional name and it'll bring up the right homeopathic that way. So Butterfly Express is a really good resource if you want to put together your own sites. For more rare ones that I've had a few that I've needed that Butterfly does not carry, the IE Organics, boy, they've got everything. And that's a little more expensive. You're looking at more like $20 for homeopathic, but for some rare ones that I've needed, I have used that as a source. So that gives you a lot of places where you can go and you can actually buy the homeopathics. Okay. Let me pull up chat box here. Okay. I've got to back up a long way. Okay. Aren't they the same book? One is red and one is green. Yes, I think some editions are green of the book. So just look at the title. The author on both of them is Robin Murphy for those books. And they've got them on Amazon. You can order them on Amazon if you want. Okay, Google is now a pharmaceutical company. Yeah. It is. It's been bought out. So you just need to know what you're dealing with. Are they going to say 200C on the label? Yeah, when you order homeopathic, you will pick your potency. Any website, you're going to pick your potency. And so I pick 200C always. Well, 99% of the time when I'm ordering a homeopathic, I pick 200C. Okay, Karen will answer that in a second. What size are those in my 10 and 20 pack? These are 2-dram bottles. Most homeopathics come in the, I'm sorry, I should have grabbed one of my bigger bottles. They come in the bigger bottles, but for traveling, I love these little skinny ones because they're really nice to take traveling. This is a 2-dram size. And the nice thing is that the 2-dram size fits really well in an essential oils case. So that's why that's really handy. Okay. Okay, yes, I have 2 red books. Okay, I got a good kit from Homeopathy World. Yeah, Hahnemann Labs is another source. Yeah, those will be more expensive, but there are a lot of good places to get where I got those cases on Amazon. Okay. Okay, if you're only going to own 3 homeopathics, here are the 3 to own. Aconite, Arnica, and Arsenicum album. I find it interesting. They're all A's. Aconite's a nickname. All homeopathics have nicknames, which can get a little confusing. The formal Latin name of aconite is Aconium napellus. But it's called, if you're reading about it on Google, it's almost always going to be called aconite. That's its nickname. Aconite is your emergency homeopathic. Okay, it's for anything that is sudden. So you've got someone going into shock, you give them aconite. Someone who's having a panic attack and thinks they're going to die, you give them aconite. Okay, someone who's getting on a plane and panics so bad they think they're going to die, aconite. Okay, you're all of a sudden coming down with a cold, first signs of a cold, aconite. Okay, anything that is sudden, this is what you use. So this is your #1 emergency homeopathic. Okay, arnica, we talked about arnica. Arnica is your owie homeopathic. Okay, bruises, sprains, soreness. Arnica is great. Put it on anything that hurts, pretty much. Okay. And then I told you already about Arsenicum album, really good for digestive issues, food poisoning, that specific type of anxiety that is very common. that's its main two things: anxiety and digestive issues. This is the one for traveler's diarrhea as well. So so yeah, these I would consider, if you're only going to own 3 homeopathics, these are the 3 you own. But once you own 3, you will want to own 300. So I'm sorry, it's just an addiction. Okay. Okay, so let's review what we've covered in the class so far. Okay, let me, oh, never mind, that's dying. Okay. Okay, so let's review what you have learned how to do with homeopathics in this class. It died. Here's what you now know how to do. You now understand what a homeopathic is and how they are made. Okay, it's no longer this mystery or woo-woo thing. You know what this is. You know the history of homeopathy and how they are used worldwide. The science of how homeopathics work and how they are proven. You know how to use the medical approach of like cures like, even though it feels like standing on your head for a while because it's opposites, boy, it opens up a whole new world. You know the advantages of homeopathic treatment, the rules of homeopathic treatment. Those rules are really important. Like I say, boy, had I been doing a lot of things wrong, and a lot of people I knew had been doing a lot of things wrong. You know how to do a symptom-based treatment, right? How to look at the symptom picture and what symptoms to look for when you're selecting a remedy. We've given you resources for finding remedies and resources for buying homeopathics. Okay. So that is a lot of stuff for one class, okay? That's a lot of information. I know some of you, your eyes may be glazing over. I know that's a lot of information. But I wanted to give you as much as I could to help you see how this works, to help open your eyes to the possibilities of things you may have never known are possible, and to actually, instead of it seeming like some weird thing, to actually see this is a very precise science. And if you want it to work, you got to play by the rules, just like any other kind of science. But you guys now understand what those rules are and how you can go about treating all sorts of things. Okay. So Karen asked about the 6-week course. If you want to dig deeper and get more specific, okay, this is week 1 of the 6-week course. This is, but I wanted everybody to understand these core things about homeopathics. So that's why I've opened this first class up for anyone who wants it. But if you want to continue on in the class and dig deeper, in the next weeks, we're going to get, week 2 will be how to really administer homeopathics. We'll get into selection, dosing, frequency, order, all of those kinds of specifics. Week 3 will be how to use gentle homeopathy. That is a specific subset of homeopathics that just do beautiful, gentle things with literally 0 risk, but can do some really powerful changes. Then we're going to get into specifics. Which homeopathics and how do you use it for acute injury and illness? And then we're going to do a whole week on the same thing for emotional mental health. That's where we're going to go through those graphs of mine, okay, that I've constructed of all the different things. And then more about homeopathy for chronic illness. And then we will also have that option to get into the group buy where we can help you get the kits at way cheaper. If that is of interest for you, there's the address. You just go to simplydivineeating.com and under classes is the homeopathy class. Now, I will tell you that even though there is a cost for those 6 weeks, I have made it ridiculously cheap, and it's for the same reason. People need to know this stuff. Like, I feel really strongly about this. So normally a 6-week course costs about $300. You guys, I'm doing the 6-week course for $50 because I want every single person on earth to be able to do this. So if you want, I really have tried hard today to give you the stuff so that you can dive into it now if you choose to. If you would like the additional information and guidance through more of the specifics, you are more than welcome to still join into the 6-week class and continue with us. If the rest of that is helpful for you, please join us. $50 for 6 classes is, like I say, it's ridiculously cheap. But I want this to be within the reach of anyone who this can help. I am not kidding when I say that if there is one thing You know, there were a lot of holistic things I learned early in my life. I learned nutrition really early. And if I'd never learned nutrition, I'd probably say the same thing, but I had that, but I didn't have homeopathics. And if I had had the nutrition aspect and the homeopathics at the same time, wow, we could have really solved some things a lot faster and a lot deeper and a lot sooner. So I hope this opens up a whole new world for you. Okay, so that is the end of what I've got for material. We've already gone 2 hours. So for any of you who need to jump off, please feel free to do that. Okay, but I'm happy to stick around here for a few more minutes and answer questions. So let me go back to the chat box here. Okay. Okay, we already did that. Can you use them before a panic attack? Okay, so Karen, what you're gonna wanna do is, if you're trying to do something proactively, that's gonna be a constitutional treatment. You're not gonna use aconite preemptively, okay? You're gonna be looking at a constitutional treatment that you would be using on a more extended basis and preemptively. Aconite you're gonna use in the moment. So 2 different things used 2 different ways, okay? Will these be recorded so that they can refer back to them? Yes, every class I ever do, I record. And if you're in the 6-week course, you'll have access to all the classes forever. For those of you who are just doing this class, it will only stay on Zoom for 1 week. So if you have any friends, family, anyone you want to share, I will get you guys just on Facebook or whatever. I'll get you the link for the recording of this. It will stay on Zoom for 1 more week, so you can watch it for 1 more week, but it will automatically be replaced when I teach my next class. So there will be 1 week that anyone can view this first class. Okay, thank you. You're welcome, Julia. Where is the best place to get the basics 3? I would get them from Butterfly Express. Like I say, they'll cost you like $5 a piece. If you already signed up, where there'll be a separate link for the next class? Yes, that will be in the Facebook group. The more we can spread this, the more we can, yeah, you guys, you know, here's what I believe. There are a lot of people in the modern medicine world that are honestly trying to do a lot of good, that really are, that have really good intentions and are doing the very best they can with what they have been taught. And there are a lot of people at the top with incredibly evil intentions that know that the sicker they can keep us, the more money they make. And the more, you know, that does not make the doctors down the chain evil by any means, but there are very bad intentions at a lot of levels with this stuff because there is so much money to be made. And so, yes, the more independent we can get, just, yeah, so many benefits to that on so many levels. Okay. Okay. Okay, so 6C is the least potent. That's the most gentle form of homeopathy there is. So if you have a 6C case, you're going to need to, when you give someone a homeopathic, probably give them the homeopathic every 10 minutes for 3 or 4 doses to get the same effect of giving 1 single dose of a 200C. So you can still do it. It will just take more doses, okay, if you already have the 6C kit. Are the group buys through Butterfly Express? I'm going to be doing a combo approach to get us the cheapest thing we can. So I'll be getting things from multiple sources and putting them together myself to do this the best we can. There is a Facebook group for those in the 6-week course. For all the rest of you, the Simply Divine Eating community group on Facebook, I highly encourage you to join. You don't have to have taken any classes from me to be in that group, or you don't have to have any intentions of taking any classes from me to be in that group. That is for anyone who wants to discuss holistic health and nutrition. And so in that Facebook group, you can post questions. You'll get answers from me and from lots of other people, which is really helpful. We share recipes. We do all sorts of stuff in that group. So for those who are not taking the 6-week course, the best place to go is to go on Facebook and join the Simply Divine Eating community. That is just, it's not an open group in that not everyone can see. You've got to ask permission to join, but there's no obligation with me to join that. It's just a discussion and question and answer group. So feel free to go there. For those who want to take the 6-week course, there is a separate Facebook group for the 6-week course. Okay. Okay. Tell us a little bit about your background and whether, and if you're qualified to teach this place. Okay. Okay. So I have some things I'm like certified in, like I'm certified in neurofeedback and stuff, but I have a lot of things that I am not because they're not good. Like I have taught nutrition now for 18 years. I'm not a nutritionist because what a nutritionist is taught to teach is terrible. I have a background in chemistry, and I am an incredibly in-depth learner, and most of what I teach is from me diving in and learning myself. I have taken classes in homeopathy. I have read an enormous number of books, and I've practiced with it every day for the last 1.5 years. But I do not have any certification in homeopathy. I do not pretend to be a certified homeopath, which is why I'm not prescribing to any of you specific treatments for constitutional issues. But I do have a really good understanding of the basic principles of how this works and how to take this and put it in a way that is understandable in a short amount of time so that you can actually get into doing this instead of getting lost in all of the theory. And so that's what I'm trying to do with this class, and that's the background that I'm coming from. Is Butterfly Express local, or do we need to order them? Butterfly Express is in Idaho. You can pick up locally, but I usually order and have them shipped. So, okay. Yeah, people are, thank you guys for answering people's questions. Thank you, Julia. Yes, the Facebook group has been set up. So if you have joined the 6-week course and are not in the Facebook group, let me know and I'll make sure that you get added. Okay. All right. Muscle testing. Okay. So let's talk about muscle testing. Tonight is not the place to get into an in-depth discussion of muscle testing just because it's a longer discussion. But I do want to say, for those of you who are familiar with muscle testing, yes, you can use muscle testing in identifying the correct remedy match to a situation. However, I do give that with some caveats. Muscle testing is only as good as the questions that you ask, and you need to understand homeopathy enough to ask the correct educated question. I also find that I am most effective when I have combined study of the subject with muscle testing. Muscle testing blind is not as effective. And so for me, a combination is. But if you are not familiar with muscle testing, if that is not something you are comfortable with, it is in no way, 90% of homeopaths are not using that. They are coming at it from a strictly scientific point of view. So if that is a skill that you have and you want to use, by all means, add it to the pile. If it's not, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Homeopathy works the way I like to describe it. And I've worked with a homeopath in the UK who was working with me, and she actually brought this up with the issue of muscle testing. And she basically said, she is very scientifically minded. She approaches homeopathy from a very scientific point of view, but she has a daughter who is incredibly intuitive and approaches homeopathy from a more muscle testing point of view. And they work together and combine those skills to make it the most effective. So homeopathy works either way. It's a bridge between the scientific world and the holistic world. It's this beautiful bridge, and it works well no matter which mindset you're coming from. And that's one of the things I love about it. You can go about it either way. Can you recommend something to help with restless leg syndrome? No, not with just a single symptom. I can't. However, I would tell you to look carefully at your minerals, because I think you probably would find some help with the mineral remedies. But we would need more than that, right? Okay, you've got to look at, you know, what makes it better, what makes it worse, what emotional issues are accompanying it, all of that. Remember, full symptom picture before you can pick a homeopathic. Okay, other questions? Other things you guys brought up at the beginning that we haven't. I know you guys asked about a lot of specific diagnoses. Can you see now why I can't just throw out an answer? Because we would need to sit down, take a half an hour, go over all the symptoms that are playing into that with you, and then see if we could narrow that down to which homeopathic would be the most effective. Now, an exception to that, okay, let me say if you were only going to own 4 homeopathics, the one to add is sepia if you are female. Sepia is considered the woman's homeopathic. It is the one that, and it's the one you're going to want for menopause. It's the one that addresses hormonal issues. It is also the #1 homeopathic for oh, I'm tired. I'm sorry, guys. I'm losing my mind. Postpartum depression. It is the #1 homeopathic for mommy overwhelm. Okay, I have used it that way. When you get to the point where you're just like, I cannot take this noise and this chaos and one more responsibility 1 second longer, sepia is really good for that. So it's considered the woman's homeopathic, and there's a lot of female type issues that it is really good for. So that's another one that's great to add to your list. And for the person who asked about menopause, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be the one you want for menopause. Okay, other questions I did not answer that I can answer. I never pretend to be the beginning and end of all knowledge, but I will share whatever I have got. Anything else? Okay. Was that helpful? Does that give you a frame of reference of how to look at this and really use it in a practical sense? Okay. All right. So I will be posting on my Facebook page and on my business pages on Facebook. I will be posting the link for the recording. It will be available for 1 week. Feel free to share with anyone you think this would help. This class is an open book. I want to get this information out to as many people as possible. Okay, so Melissa's question about dosing and dilution. Are you talking about sepia? Okay, Melissa, when you go to Butterfly Express, there's a pull down menu that you can change the potency from 30C to 200. You can pick. All of theirs you can pick between 2 potencies. I always get 200. Okay, so that's for potency. What was the other question? What did I miss? Was there something else? Were you asking how often? I know, Karen, I wish you were closer too. We could eat together. Okay. Okay. So, you know, if I think I saw and I missed, you know, if you're asking like, how would you take the sepia? You're there again, it's going to depend on your situation. So if you're taking a 200C, what I would do, I would try it every day, once a day, every day for 3 days. And then I would wait and see. Okay. See if there's an improvement in symptoms. If there is an improvement in symptoms, then you're gonna redose when it recurs. There is something about the number 3. Often 3 doses of something is kind of the amount it takes to kickstart something. I don't know what that is, but there is something to that. Okay, drops, remember, it doesn't matter. Take 1 drop, take 100 drops, take 1,000 drops. It's the same. It's how often you take it that matters, not how many drops you take per dose. Yeah, makes no difference. So you might as well preserve your homeopathic and just take a drop. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your questions. Be brave, dive in. Feel free to join us in the 6-week course where we'll get into the nitty-gritty detail of all of this, but I hope that gives all of you enough to really understand what this is and how you can use it in your own family. So if you have any additional questions, you can send emails to support@simplydivineeating.com. That will go to Crystal, who is my assistant. She's great at answering the tech questions and stuff. If it's something specific that needs to be funneled to me, she will do that. But if you have a question about nutrition, if you have a question about homeopathics, please do it in the Simply Divine Eating Community Facebook group instead of a private email to me. The reason for that is that 90% of the questions I get are repeat questions, right? Everybody has the same question. If I answer it in the Facebook group, I can answer it for hundreds of people at the same time. If you privately email me, then I have to answer them one at a time, and I don't necessarily have the time to do that. So if you have questions about any kinds of specific things that I teach, please ask the question in the Facebook group. Once again, that's Simply Divine Eating Community. And you can ask anything about nutrition or any of the holistic things that I teach in that Facebook group there. And that way we can have a much bigger discussion, which is, it's better for you because you get more input, and it's better for me because I can answer it for more people at a time. So if you've got more questions, that's where to go with that. If you have tech questions about how to access anything with the classes, then send that to support@Simply Divine Eating, and that will go to Crystal. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night. I hope to see you again. And
Thank you.
Learning together.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome.